Welcome everyone.
Run with it. Run with it. Run with
We wanted to give y'all a little bit of the music break, and we appreciate y'all for coming into our conversation.
No, they can barely hear you over that time.
They can't hear me?
Barely.
Can you hear the music?
Well, not now. It's either gonna be you or the music. Pick one.
You hear the music? Okay, music.
One, two, three, go! Go!
Okay, I'm gonna bring our music down.
It actually feels warmer in the room now.
You got some energy, you got some life into you.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have to sit and act like an adult again for the next 30 minutes.
I mean, you had the whole lighter go in. It was like, hey.
Yeah, let's not address the fact that it was already in my pocket, but that's another topic.
Welcome everyone, please. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining. If you would like, we would love to see your beautiful faces. So please show your screens. And we will be talking about shifting our thoughts about masculine and feminine energy. I am Nadine G. I am the owner of Let's Converse, which is a premium wellness brand for people of color, where we cultivate community and culture through conversation. And I'm so happy to have joined Fit for Purpose to create the Be Well experience for you. And so we are going through 8 different pillars of wellness. And right now we are in the relational wellness pillar. And we have with us today, Mr. JD from Mastermind Connect, who is gonna be sharing with us. And we're gonna engage in a conversation. So everyone who comes into this room, we actually want you to come off of mute right now. We are talking. This is a full-blown conversation. No one in this space is allowed to be on mute. I get it if you don't want to show us your beautiful faces. We do want to see your faces, but faces and voices, right? At least voices. So come on in. It should be a great conversation. And right now we're semi-balanced. We got some ladies and we got a gentleman in here. So this should be cool.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and this is, I kind of like that it's starting off on the smaller end because the people who show up on time, not that I'm upset, because if I had to choose between this and the Soca set, I might actually go to the Soca set, but that's another So we're gonna get into some real good stuff, man. Today we gonna do a transition from, what was commonly understood as being the way, what the transition involved, and what we're dealing with today, us being like at the forefront of a very, very real, like worldwide shift between what gender roles and concepts of like masculine and femininity look like. I know we have a couple people in here who already know how we get down. Shout out to the homie Omar Davis. I already know you kept your session earlier. Crash Bell, please check them out. They would definitely, if you like the Be Well, then you definitely will like anything that Crash Bell does. First and foremost, thank you for choosing to come here today. I appreciate your time. You could have been napping, you could have been Netflix binge watching, you could have been in another Be Well experience session, but you decided to come and chill with all us, which makes me happy. Nadine, do you want me to kick it off, or do you want to lead out this relay?
To kick this off, so full transparency, y'all, I was trying to get you guys a brand that was solely female based. My personal brand is both men and women of color, and I know Mastermind Connect is primarily men of color. However, I will be the voice of the ladies today. I am here so that we can make sure that we are heard and we are in the room. And so I'm actually really excited because I thought I was just doing the intro and I was just going to sit in the background. And now I get to really be fully interactive and engage in this conversation. And anyone who knows me knows that I love to converse. That is the name of my first business, Let's Converse. And so I'm super excited to be here, but I'm gonna let the men start. We're gonna give them their shine and we're gonna sit back like ladies and we're gonna join in. We're gonna join in.
Why you made it sound like you just babysitting, like you just gave us the controller with it unplugged from the video game?
We gotta
Don't let them be cute, you know, whatever. They ain't doing nothing, but we're gonna let them have it. All right.
That's hilarious.
Exactly, right? Like, dang, we starting off like that. But, good afternoon for those who just came in. My name is JD Weatherspoon. I am a co-founder and director of strategy and development at the Mastermind Connect LLC. We are based out of Brooklyn, New York. However, we do operate physically in New York City, Washington, D.C., the greater Denver, Colorado metro area, and also Los Angeles. Remotely, we have our own app called Alchemy, and that is completely global, that is worldwide. And as Nadine mentioned, you know, our focus is to be a hub for today's progressive man. And our premise is definitely all man. That does not mean that we don't include our queens, because to be honest, and this is full transparency, we took a lot of our cues from the sisters when we put this together.
Heard that though, right?
Oh, I gave you your points.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate that love.
No, we got to give credit where credit is due, man. We got to give credit where credit is due. And right now we want to get into it because we don't have very long. And once we get into this, there will be questions and there's going to be a lot of crossfire, which we want to happen. So things to keep in mind, you know, what happens here doesn't stay here because it's broadcasting, but I definitely
We're live.
Exactly, right? I definitely want you to take what's learned here to as many people as you can. Number two, you know, mind your business. Let me break down what that looks like. What someone says and where the place that they were in when they spoke it is their business. How that makes you feel and how that lands on you is your business. Both are okay. This is a safe space, but let's keep it respectful. And anybody else have any ground rules you want to lay down before we get into this good game? Cool, perfect. So, quick concept to get everybody up to speed. Like, we know, you and I, that historically being a man was pretty much like masculinity was relegated to two parameters. Like, either you're going to be like a provider, a protector, you know, somebody to open up the jars, kill the spiders, take out the trash, pay the bills. You didn't change diapers. You didn't show emotion. What we're seeing a lot now is with the change in the way that women have empowered themselves and learned to click together, learn to get ownership, started to make their own money, we're realizing that we don't have to necessarily be providers or protectors in the same way. It's more about learning how to be companions. What that has resulted in is a lot of dudes out, you know, necessarily feeling lost, not seeing where they fit in the world. And that's definitely contributed to the feelings of like depression, feeling lost, not having connection and needing a tribe, but also men not being taught or like enculturated on how to express themselves or their emotions and really be partners, as opposed to just like being providers and people to handle it. What I want to know is what manhood looks like to the people in this call. And I actually want to pitch it over and start with Queen Nadine. Like, what does that look like to you versus what do you actually find that you need as a woman?
Yeah, and for me, I think that some of those traditional roles definitely fall into play when I consider manhood. There's something beautiful about masculinity and strength that is a juxtaposition to the softness of womanhood, right? It isn't totally in isolation, and that's the only thing that makes you a man. We know that men are whole human beings as well. And what I've found, especially as I've gotten older, is that the piece that I really was needing in a partner and that was missing was that emotional connection, right? And that emotional support and that love. And that when my world was crazy, and you know, we talk about these gender roles where as a woman it's like, be strong, do these things as well. We get these narratives, right? You know, take care of your family. When all of those things, when I felt like I was doing too much and I just needed a hug, like finding a man who could actually emotionally care for me was hard, right? And so it really became, for me, with my boyfriend now, that was one of the things that I really appreciate, was that and it was on my checklist. I was like, I need a man who can emotionally connect with me, and be able to be that provider, but in a different way. So not just providing money, but like really providing support that allows me to lean, and for me to be that support to him, for him to lean. And so there is a strength that I think comes with masculinity that's different than femininity, but that's how I would describe it. And then I think we should go around the room. So who else would like to jump in? You want to hear your voices. Otherwise, we're gonna call y'all out. We got a good number in here right now. So the question is, how do you define manhood?
I'll jump in.
All right.
Hi, can you speak up a little bit for me?
Are you talking to me?
No, Omar, we can't hear you.
Fine. What about now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. I was gonna say for me, it really comes down to just redefining. Based on what I was taught manhood was. I had to learn the hard way that that's not what manhood is at all, and just come to an understanding that for me, I had to just understand my emotions and my feelings, because if not, I was feeling like I was destroying myself. And so manhood to me is definitely a sign of being aware of when not to be vulnerable, and when to express what you feel, and also live by integrity on what you say. And the hardest thing is forgive. I think it's woman and man, to be a full woman and to be a full man. I've come to the realization that it's really about being able to forgive fully.
Thanks for that. We are in an open discussion now. I know there's some people who are just joining us. Our question right now to everyone in the room, as you all were upgraded to panelists, so you shall be speaking with us. We want to hear your beautiful voices, is how do you define manhood?
Okay, and that's fine. I think with a quick pivot, how does that definition of manhood at its core differ from what womanhood looks like?
Let me jump in. Hi, this is Lynn.
How you doing, Lynn?
Good. Hi, JD. Hi, Omar, everyone. Hi, Nadine. It's a hard one because, of course, this is never a question I've ever sat down and asked myself. So that's part of the reason I came to the panel, to kind of hear and reflect. Because at the beginning, I think it was Nadine was saying, and also you, JD, the provider protector role. And I realized it's very easy for me to drop the provider role. I can provide for myself. But then it's interesting, the resistance that I have to drop the protector role. As in, hey, you need to deal with this. You're the one with the upper body strength. So somehow I still have that kind of interesting expectation of masculinity. How does it differ for femininity for me? Because the hard part is that my parents played traditional roles, and in my life I don't want the exact same traditional roles. So I really love what Nadine was saying in terms of that kind of emotional connection, but for me it links more to balance. If to bring someone in my sphere who's a balance to my femininity, as I am a balance to their masculinity. So looking for that balance of what is strong in one, maybe less strong in another, and vice versa, for me creates the best possible scenario. Because I often find that when I've dated people, when both of us were strong in one area, all of a sudden we were competing. And it was great for me because it made me, better at some things. But at the same time, we had troubles then remembering our complementarity. So looking for those places, looking for this constant compromise, looking for this supporting each other. I really like what Nadine said earlier, that emotionally just wanting that hug is what she wanted at that moment. And other times she may be the one who needs to be giving that hug in the emotional balance, yin yang kind of a connection. So just to quickly summarize what I mean is that I still need to look at the fact that the protector role, I have a hard time releasing that from masculinity, and also being very interested in the fact that seeking balance in some areas of my life and not competition between, you know, genders is also quite important in that discussion.
So
Thank
Lynn,
you.
you brought up, number one, thank you for that. And I think that was a really, really good take, because for one, the protector detail, and you mentioned wanting to sort of release it. I guess my first question for you is, do you automatically think that all gender roles need to be let go of? And then the next one is the competition. Where does your need to compete come from?
Unmute again. Let me start with the last question. My need to compete comes from in areas where I feel I'm strong and he's strong as well. If this is an area where I'm not strong and he's strong, then it's very easy for me to say, honey, this is yours. You're strong in this area. In terms of our couple, you lead in this area. But in an area where both of us are strong, I find that to relationship where it's like, oh, excuse me, and I'm rolling up my sleeve and going, oh, you strong, I'm strong too. And then we have this kind of competing agenda, and it becomes difficult for us to say, in this moment you lead, in this moment I will lead in these areas where we are strong. I'm sorry, in answering the second question, I've forgotten your first question, JD. If you ask it again, I promise to say something.
Oh, as far as the protector role, and you don't need to say anything if you don't feel like you have anything to say about it, but you mentioned that there's, you questioned why you still attach like that protector role, the idea of manhood. My question is, is it absolutely necessary to remove that? Like, do we need to be so woke and so progressive that we completely dash all gender roles altogether?
That is a very good question. For me, the reason that I wanted to look at that, perhaps to release it, is not to create this, you know, box where this person, because of his gender, needed to fit. You're a man, therefore you must protect. And because I know that vice versa, it would irritate me if someone says you're a woman, therefore you must fill in the blank. So that's part of the reason I wanted to release. But you have a good point. Perhaps this is something also to look at, not necessarily as a release, but as a ever-changing perception.
I wanted to jump in on that. Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that thought as well. And I typed in the chat, humility and different ways to lead. I think when I'm thinking about all of these terms, provider, protector, like different ways to be a provider, different ways to be a protector, right? And sometimes we kind of stereotype them that they're supposed to look a certain way, right? And so it becomes competition when we both need to lead in the same way. Like, my voice needs to be heard. No, my voice needs to be heard. Whereas sometimes like leading from behind and like gently nudging is the same as being the loud voice, right? It has the same impact. And being able to navigate and balance, I think that word of balance is important. And it being kind of a wave, right? Of where you can adjust. And so I do think the challenge for me becomes is that I do think that, like, I appreciate gender roles. Like, they're helpful for me. I don't think that me and my mate need to be the exact same person or doing the exact same time. But then I also understand how those labels can be really restrictive and really damaging and really toxic, right? And so then how do we find that balance or that space where we can rest in who we are based on our gender, but then we can kind of step outside of the box or the stereotype.
So I really wanted to jump in real quick, and I apologize for the noise, so I'll make this as quick as possible. I think a lot of it comes down to the socialization and I'm sorry, can everyone hear me? I know I have my mask on. All right. A lot of it comes down to the socialization of masculine and feminine energies. We all have to realize that those are core energies, and even as a man, I can have a core feminine energy, and the socialization is what creates the gender norms and creates the gender roles that we play on. So as a man, I have a strong feminine core, but at the same time, I'm also a protector because I'm socialized as a male to be that. Women protect all the time. You start from just the biological sense of it. You have the baby inside of you. You're protecting it. The maternal instinct is that a protector. So those are masculine energies coming out, and we both share, regardless of what your gender is, you share both masculine and feminine energies, and it's the socialization that creates the gender norms. And I think that we got to look at how those gender norms are being portrayed. I know for me growing up, because a lot of men take masculine energy to just be that, me being overly emotional was looked at as being a boon to me being a man. Then I had to keep trying to reinvent myself to generate more masculine energy, and all I did was handicap me. I think that we just have to realize that who we are innately, and then figure out our roles within society, which could be very different from one another.
I'd like to piggyback off that for sure. And I agree 100% with what Clarence is saying. By comprehension of the social identity of what it means to be a female versus the social identity of what it means to be a male. And then even looking at the origin of our species and how it's been perpetrated in a way that has been, how can I put it, written about, but they left out a lot of part of the empowerment of the woman, for one, the empowerment of the feminine origin of the feminine species. And they manipulated the data and the information that we now know as history to give us the idea that men was always this masculine presence and this idea. But whenever you think about something that's completely aside from this is different beings in different existences, and even like he said, being feminine versus masculine, there are more feminine beings than there are masculine beings in some point in time, but it always comes back to the balance. And that balance doesn't mean that you're going to be physically a woman or physically a man. It really has to do with the energetic pools of what the earth needs. And so the earth needs to have a more feminine presence now, because the masculine presence has been very, very high. And so now that there are more feminine type of men coming into the existence, and now we have the voice to even express that, I can say myself, I'm definitely more feminine embodied man, but I'm super masculine. So I've learned how to balance the two. And at the same time, learning that my feminine aspects is not a detriment. It's not a handicap. It's not weakness. It's not coward. It's not a bitch. It's not soft. It's not none of that shit. And a woman is also not a bitch, soft, weak, vulnerable, emotional. Like, that's not that. That's wrong. What's true is the fact that the feminine energy does have a function, just like the masculine energy has a function. And so when we are able to live in the function of the feminine and masculine, the gender, the biological process of your penis or your vagina has nothing to do with your energy. It just has to do with your biology. And that's the construct that we seem to be confused with right now, is that we get the biology mixed up with the energetics, and they're completely separate.
I agree 100% with you, Omar. That's been a frustrating thing for me when we attribute energies to your reproductive organs. I think once we do that, we then mess up the beautiful balance that is feminine and masculine energy. I know my dad, he makes fun of me. He says I have a man spirit. He's West Indian. And so if you have any West Indian parents, you know what I mean. When you have a young girl in the family who is logical, who's direct, who straightforward, just has a lot of the masculine energy. It's like, oh, you got a man spirit, you need to be a woman. And I was like, oh no, I'm very much a woman. I am a woman in my biology. And I also have masculine energy. It does not mean that I am any different than, anything else. And so I love the fact that you laid that out, that is not our biology. And then another thing is that because we have connected energies to our reproductive organs, that we then, a lot of things come out as far as seeing feminine energy as negative, and then our viewing of women as inferior. And so when you tell a little boy who's very nurturing and caring that he's acting like a little girl and telling him that as if it's a negative thing, the message that you're sending is, one, being a girl is negative, and two, this act of nurturing is a weakness. And so now you have these young boys then telling themselves, oh, well, I need to stifle my emotions, which then stifles their emotional maturity. And it's just a whole bunch of chaos and bacchanal starts to happen. So yeah.
I feel like that's an insult to bacchanal. Yo,
I wanted to tie in the opposite of that too. So also like this strong Black woman syndrome, right? Like this idea that if I am a provider, if I can take care of myself, if I could do these things, that, oh, you're too masculine, you need to be soft and pretty and pink, and you need to like bring that down, so it's this idea of like you can't step into your power, right? And it becomes a negative thing for a woman if you have these so-called masculine traits and you get things like, oh, that's why you single, you doing too much, and so there's a lot of these biases that we hold against one another that I think that as a community, we need to work together to kind of shift the narrative.
No, absolutely. One of the, I think, messiest details of this work is convincing people that most of what they think they need to or are supposed to do is completely predicated on some bullshit, to be honest with you. Especially among like Black and brown communities, it's created this real dynamic of like tit for tat, because they're like these wounds that still haven't been addressed. So it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna give up until here. And if I don't see you taking X amount of steps, I ain't moving. I'll apologize when you apologize. And then as a result of that, nobody really goes anywhere except for in circles, because relationships are never 50-50. Like at best, 60-40 at best. But I mean, there's always sort of that interplay, whether that be financial, whether that be emotional, whether that be like physical time. Like life isn't perfect. What I've noticed is I think there's a very real fear, especially for a lot of the guys that we work with, because there is a, like, we're in a period now where we have to redefine what our role even looks like, because as previously mentioned, like statistically, y'all probably gonna be making more than us anyway. Like y'all don't really need us for that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with y'all having financial independence. First and foremost, I think that's awesome, because whether I make 30 and you make 70 or vice versa, 100 grand is 100 grand. The household wins. But I think the point is there needs to be that shift for us to jump inside and undo a lot of the damage that was taught to us, either by the media, society, whatever you want to call it. And if you really want to like get into that sticky topic, mothers, aunties, and sisters reinforce negative male paradigms just as much as dads, uncles, and grandfathers do. But I think the biggest detail that I've seen is based on who either taught you how to love or who didn't. When you are a self-actualized male that speaks from both a protector space and a caring space, there is confusion, and a lot of women don't know how to support that, and vice versa. So my open-ended question to the floor is, who taught you how to love, and how do you carry that into the relationships that you enter into?
Feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in.
Yeah, really, just jump in. Don't even call no names.
So I'll jump in. For me, that's a convoluted and kind of difficult question because I don't feel like I've totally learned how to love because I'm still grappling with understanding love for self, which has to start at the foundation towards loving someone else. Now that I'm a father, I'm realizing that love is complex, but it has a simplicity to it that is beautiful. And learning how to maneuver through love, realizing that you don't necessarily fall in love, you stand in love, and realizing my role in terms of what that love means, it being a verb. My parents fought a lot. My parents were hard to deal with, and I don't think that they ever truly loved each other. They were just part of just the conditions of having kids and having to be together for kids. Um, and I just realized that learning how to love is a process of understanding who you are in your relation to this world, this earth, and how to make sense of connecting with other people. Because now that I'm growing and figuring out me, even at my big age of 35, I'm still figuring out me. I'm still figuring out how to just be. And I think that I can't fully answer this question, but wanted to articulate myself because this is big for me to be able to articulate that even as a man who I don't struggle with emotions, but I struggle with the action of love and being in love.
Can I just get a hand raise? How many people in here or in the chat, if we can't see your face, struggle with the idea of love and being in love and what all of this means? And if you've been in that position. Just so that you know you're not alone out here, bro. I do know that for a fact, even for me, like as a woman and trying to figure out love, we get all these images, like either our parents made it or they didn't make it. You know, either they were staying together just for the kids or they separated or somebody left. I know we were mentioning in the chat, like this idea of like not being able to lean into one another. But a lot of that comes from the trauma in our households that we don't talk about. We don't talk about how seeing how our parents or grandparents or cousins or aunties and how those relationships work, how that actually infiltrated into how we move in relationships, you know, and how many of us actually take the time to unpack that and then to be able to go into a relationship with healthy ideas, you know. So these conversations, just like us all here today, is like a starting point of us really dissecting these narratives and be able to see like, wow, this is coming from someplace, you know. Like for me, full transparency, you know, my dad left because he was a drug addict and my mother was like, nah, we can't do this, you know. And maybe they both left, right? But in my head, I was like, he left me, you know. And so then I had to deal with the fact of feeling like, can I actually trust any man to support me or lean? All these women in my household are doing the damn thing. I could be a woman who do the damn thing. But in the same breath, I was always looking for someone who would allow me to lean because I felt like men would just come and leave and I couldn't depend on them, right? So I had to recognize that in my own mindset and shift my narrative and not base every man on that experience and not assume that someone wouldn't stay and that someone wouldn't be supportive and someone wouldn't choose me, right? And so all of that stuff takes process and time, but we have to acknowledge that that stuff is happening in the background of our minds.
Another follow-up to that is, one thing I had to learn is that you can't necessarily gauge someone's integrity. Like not everyone's integrity with like the same rubric. Like I realized that the way that I would look at how a man shows up versus how a woman shows up sort of needs a completely different scale, because like the virtues come from two different places a lot of the time. And so what I wanted to know is whether or not love as a verb looks different from a man versus from a woman? And that's my last open question, because I know we got like 5 more minutes.
In short, I'll say no. I think that love exists without gender. Love exists without binds. Again, going back to that socialization, I think love, it just is. And I think it looks different because of we as people are different. And I think that's the only differentiation factor of love.
I agree with Clarence as far as love itself. However, because of socialization, we can't ignore that. Because of the trauma that Nadine said, we can't ignore any of this. And so, although love itself exists without confines, without labels, without boxes, as us not poor humans, but as humans, the way that we have contained love and the way we've socialized it, I think we do show up differently. Not all the time, but if we were to speak generally, I do think so. I'm thinking of a couple one of the couples I work with, and the man shows up with action. That's what I said, not poor humans, but that's what I was trying to not say, poor humans. But it's a couple that I was working with, and he shows up by action. Like he does things. However, he's very rough and aggressive in his communication styles. And his wife, she understands love to be that soft and nurturing and speaking nice to a person. And so in the beginning, it was really hard for her to understand we talk about the love language and sometimes it becomes kind of trite, but there is some truth to it. Because his is through action. And I think a lot of, and generally speaking, some men, not all, show their love in the safe way of actions versus words or other forms as like nurturing and listening and all these other attributes that are usually related to the feminine energy. And so I think as it stands with most of us, it does show up differently, and it's just important that we can see it and recognize it.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I'll piggyback off that. That was great, because it is absolutely true that how we respond and allow love to show up in our life would only be based on our perception of that said thing. Going back to what Nadine said and what JD was saying about having the viewpoint of seeing all these things that were not taught correctly and not identifying that as love anymore, and coming up with a new idea of how you love and how you choose to love. That's something that has been really interesting for me, because knowing that I had a lot of hesitancy towards men, I pushed myself into a situation to where I was forced to love men and to accept men and to reframe my definition of manhood by joining the men's group Mastermind Connect. And so allowing myself to be challenged by facing this, I'd like to use the word in its actual form and definition. I was retarded in my connection and relationship with men. I did not have understanding. And so I could not actually identify what my relationship with a woman was, because they do have the same vibrational frequency of all is all. But based on the paradigm, I had to teach myself that I need to figure out how to love men more and love myself, because I am also that man. And then realize even how I reacted to men and what I expected of men, and how I judge men harder than I would judge women. And again, that is also not fair. And so even with my sons, with my 2 boys, I had to realize, you don't need to have them become so rough, so tough, so physical, but also you don't have to, they don't need to know how. You can just show them the way. And it's been a tricky thing for me, because I learned by not having a man. And so for me, I was like, they need to learn the same way. But at the end of the day, well, do they? Because I'm here. And so even seeing how I related that love to my kids, and then changing how I love my kids, because I started to redefine how I love men. But 100%, love is definitely all encompassing and allowing. But truthfully, we have a lot of stigmas in the way we see love. And so that's something that we as a, like you say, Nadine, that community, we each have to work on defining that together and individually, and also not judging what somebody else think about how they love. Like, let them love the way they love.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, just to wrap it up, I think ultimately a lot of that comes by misunderstanding the real definition of what it is that we think we're talking about. Like, when it comes to, I think there's such an immature representation of masculine and feminine energy in the world, definitely more so on the masculine side, as opposed to like showing up in its fullness. That immature representation has become the standard. So people have almost forgotten what it actually looks like to see somebody fully show up in like divine masculine presence. So much so that when they do, it's like, okay, so what's this? I don't know what to do with that. I'm right-handed. These are left-handed scissors. I can't cut that with that. So I think the more that we continue to delve and just push, the culture forward and redefine, and this is the job for both sides of the village for sure, because until we get to the point where both, members of the tribe can meet like in the middle, it's always going to feel lopsided.
And I guess I'll just end on, like, I'm so about having spaces where both men and women come into the room, just because there is a special energy that we both bring and a unique perspective. But when we can talk together and we can have these conversations, it helps us to come back to that middle ground and for us to understand that we aren't as different as we think we are, and that there are so many similarities. And so I am very thankful for the conversation today. It was very rich and enlightening. I am thankful for JD and Mastermind Connect for really jumping into this, right? And so can we unmute and give some love to our presenter today?
Yay!
Yeah, brother. Appreciate it.
Clap, 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 clap. Well done, well
Awesome
done.
job. Awesome.
Thank y'all, brothers. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on, before we close out,
Hey, ladies.
PSA.
Let me give our roses while we're here. Let's give our roses.
Hey, stop real quick. All right.
What's up?
So we are dropping a series called, I saw a comment that said, would love to hear more about divine masculinity. Lynn, we got you. We're actually dropping a series called Divine Masculine Activated, like in the next 7 to 10 days. So that is definitely going down. Jamar, what do you have to say before we close out?
Oh, sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, it's all good.
But I'm here. I'm listening. Thank you.
No.
Where can we look? Oh, there it is. So will we find this drop at Mastermind Connect on IG?
Yeah.
Will.
That's my question. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Within the next like 5 to 7 days, you will actually see us dropping content and it will have links and a whole nine. So yes, just follow us on IG. And for any guys in here that are not hip, check out the Alchemy app as well. And yes, definitely, please. Nadine, let's put our heads together and get this part 2 set up, because we already see where this is going.
Thank you, everyone, again. And so our next workshop, we are going into, where are we? Community. We are going into community wellness next. And so we will be starting at 3 o'clock. We hope that you stay with us, and I will see you then. Bye, everyone. Light and love.
Bye.
Be well.
Lots of love and blessings to you guys. Bye.
Be well. Be well.